If you can hear me, please type in the chat box that you can hear me. All right. So as I mentioned, if you're on an iPad, for whatever reason, you tend to have an audio issue. So you may want to consider jumping on something else. I'm not sure what the issue is with the iPad. I know there's sometimes issues with Chrome browsers, but in any event, as long as everything technically goes okay, I'll have a copy of this that can be replayed afterwards. I'm just going to give folks about another 30 seconds or so to jump on. It's like a lot of people are jumping on about now. And then we'll get started. So again, if you just joined and you're on an iPad, you may not have audio. You probably don't hear me, so it doesn't make any difference. All right. I think people are going to just keep jumping on as we get going, but let's start on time because there's plenty to cover tonight. All right, so hi, and thanks for joining the webinar tonight, Feeding the Wolves Mental Toughness Training, presented by me, and my name is Noel Bonk. I am the founder and coach of Bonkworks Endurance Sports. Now, a little bit about my company, Bonkworks, if you're not familiar with us. We offer personalized coaching programs for cyclists, runners, and triathletes of all abilities. We also provide professional level bike fitting, performance testing, seasonal training plans, and consultations to fit your endurance sports training needs, right? So if you're interested in learning more about our services, I welcome you to set up a time to chat and learn a little bit more, okay? And my contact information will be on the slides and at the end if you need to reach out. So a little bit of housekeeping. So tonight we're going to be covering a great topic, one I think many amateur and age group athletes are interested in, but maybe don't take the time to really train it, or maybe don't even know where to begin on the mental toughness side. So, I also want to add before we start that what is covered tonight does not take the place or constitute any professional mental or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. It's simply built upon my experience and education as both a coach and a lifelong endurance athlete. So, better way to say that, this is my opinion. You're free to have your own opinion on it as well, okay? So questions as we go forward. Most of you figured out that chat box on the right-hand side. I will probably wait to the end to answer any questions unless I see something pop up that I think hits the point that I'm on right then and there. Otherwise, again, we'll hold them to the end, right? As I kind of mentioned at the beginning, unless you're just joining us now, as long as everything technically goes right, there should be a recording of the webinar that can be replayed. Also, if you're not aware of it, we have a couple other future webinars coming up. Next month, we'll have one done by Coach Matt Stair on strength training for endurance athletes. That'll be mid-January. And then we'll have another one in February run by me. That'll be a talk on anaerobic threshold and FTP and how those things kind of work, all right? So let's get started here. So I start off with, some of you guys have heard this story or familiar with this story, and it's the story of the two wolves, right? And I'll let you take a moment to read the slide because it's a lot of words on there. And you can also Google it as well, the two wolves, and you'll find several cultural examples of it out there. But basically the story is about two sides of the mind, right? The good wolf and the bad wolf represent that. And those wolves are competing for the emotional control. And which one wins is really your choice. And so while this is a great story and one that I'm fond of personally, mental toughness itself is really not that cut and dry. So mental toughness and what that story really is about balance. And that balance and ultimately mental toughness at its foundation can be boiled down to these following 3 points. 1, that the mind consists of many different parts. That 2, those parts are going to interact as we think of the wolves interacting, right? And then 3, you ultimately will decide which to feed, when to feed, and how to feed. So what is this mental toughness, right? So let's jump into defining a bit about what mental toughness really is, and maybe a little bit about what mental toughness is not, right? So first of all, mental toughness is not BS, right? It's not magic, it's not fluff, right? Your mental state and your mental toughness will have a direct impact on performance, right? This is true whether you're competing in sports, work, school, home, etc. Emotions are tied to how you act, how you perform, and how you physically feel, or even how you perceive or interpret those physical feelings, right? Those are all tied to your emotions, right? It's also a skill set, right? Did you just hop on a bike as a kid and ride away? Did you jump in the pool and learn to freestyle on your first day? Probably not, right? So you needed to do 2 things with those skills. You needed to practice and you needed to be consistent. And those same principles apply to developing mental toughness skill sets as well. Now, as I mentioned, we can also define mental toughness by what it is not. And I need to draw the line here that there's a difference between perseverance in a tough situation and one that is just plain dangerous or life-threatening, right? So easy way to think about this, if a bone is sticking out of your leg, pushing on is not mental toughness, right? That's stupidity. So spend some time thinking about the differences there, right? So sore and tired after a race or while you're in the middle of a race, that's fine, okay? But it should never be about injuring yourself. All right, so how many times have you thought or heard these at a race? I know I have, right? So you hear somebody at the race saying, oh, I'm slow, I'm never gonna get any faster, I'm gonna get beat today, I'm gonna get dropped, right? And I'm not talking about your buddy who's playing mental tricks on you. We all know that guy or gal, right, who says this, I'm not feeling good today, and then they go and tear your legs off. I'm not talking about those folks, right? But first of all, I wanna say is these thoughts and these feelings are natural, right? And it's important and they're necessary to recognize the state that we're in and for us to be in the moment, right? So the important thing is how we deal with these thoughts. Do we feed them, right? So, I have a friend, and when he lines up at a race, he says to himself, I'm here to kick everyone's ass today, right? Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. And I'm not saying you need to go to that extreme, but it's still a better mental state of performance than just resigning to the negative thoughts or that, oh, I'm going to lose or I'm going to get beat, right? So the first step is really recognizing how those negative thoughts saying I'm slow, I'm going to get beat are holding you back. Decide what value do they have to you in the moment, right? In the end, replacing those with positive thoughts costs you nothing. It has zero downside, right? Negative thoughts, when not taken critically or constructively, can have a downside, right? So what's the worst that can happen if you think positively, right? I can tell you, the more you say you lose, that you're going to lose, the more you say that you're going to get beat, or I'm going to have a terrible day, the more you really are going to make that your reality, right? So control what you can control. So let's talk a little bit about that. So you can't control the weather. I know many times we wish we can, right? You can't control if it's rainy. You can't control if it's muddy, so we can't control the race conditions. We can't really control what our competitors are going to be doing that day, but you can control your thinking and you can control your mindset in that moment, right? But so to develop and use mental toughness, we need to recognize the moment that we're in and the mental state that we're in and how that is affecting our physical state. So practice this by focusing on what you're doing now. So in that race, what am I doing right now and how well we're doing that, right? So for an example of that, to explain it a little bit better, in a bike race, you can think about the moment, am I positioning myself where I need to be? Am I eating and hydrating where I need to be? Am I at this mile one? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing now and not necessarily worrying about where I need to be at mile 80, right? Am I worrying about crashing? Am I worrying about getting dropped? So these are the things that you want to recognize, right? And, the picture on there that's on the image, I like this one. It's getting to be an old movie now, Happy Gilmore. We got Coach Chubbs there on the left and Adam Sandler's Happy Gilmore on the right. And so in this scene here and in the movie, Coach Chubbs tells Happy about going to his happy place, right? And so really what that's about is that this character was struggling with his golf game. Of course, yes, I know it's a movie, but that's tied directly to his mental state, right? That happy place that he's telling about is a way for him to reset his thoughts and focus on the physical task at hand. Again, showing how that physical performance, again, in this case, it's golf, but it can be cycling, it can be triathlon, it could be cyclocross, mountain biking. How that physical performance is affected by the mental state. So let's talk about some skills here. How do we develop those skills to develop that mental toughness, right? To feed those wolves, right? So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to come back to it before we discuss some techniques, right? Again, how did you learn to ride a bike, swim, throw, or hit a ball? Did it happen overnight? Most likely, again, it didn't, right? And here's the thing: no one is born mentally tough. We may know people who we consider to be very mentally tough characters, but I doubt they came out of the womb that way. So maybe they developed it as a youth in sports. Some people have developed it through military training or some other form of practice, but they did practice that skill set at some point to develop that mental toughness that they have and that maybe that you recognize. And here's the great thing about mental toughness. There is no upper limit to mental toughness, okay? Maybe there's an upper limit to your physiology, so you can only go so far with your physiology, but you can be a pro at mental toughness. So again, maybe you're not going to go to the Tokyo Olympics because you don't have that physiology, but that doesn't mean you can't be on par with an Olympic athlete with your mental toughness, which is a great thing about mental toughness and mental skills. All right, techniques. So let's jump a little bit into some different techniques. The first one we're going to talk about is visualizations, okay? And I'm not going to have the time to kind of deep dive all the things with these techniques, but I'm hoping that you'll spend a little bit of time on your own afterwards kind of exploring the details of each. So maybe a good time to, if you're taking notes or anything, to make a note on these. But again, I'll hopefully share the presentation afterwards. So again, visualization is probably the most common form of mental training, right? This is a technique where we rehearse in our mind, but it can also be done verbally, the task that we want to perform well at, right? So visualization is kind of in history, really kind of first showed up after the '84 Olympics, right? When the Russian researchers studying Olympic athletes found that the Olympians who had employed visualization techniques experienced a positive impact on their performance. So they did the techniques, they did better, right? Pretty simple, right? Since that time, that technique has been used extensively by high-performance athletes, right? We've heard stories of champion swimmers, maybe it's Michael Phelps, NBA players, golfers, runners, etc., using visualization techniques for mental training, for mental toughness, right? There's also several peer-reviewed research studies showing the effectiveness of visualization on performance. So going back, really, mental training, well, we always think about the physical training. Mental training is super important, and it's not BS, right? It's something we need to do, right? And again, the great thing about this, especially visualization, is it's easy to do, right? But the important part when we start trying to practice and do visualization is that to make a visualization stronger and have the desired impact, the more detail we can visualize, the better. So again, as an example, on race day, this could be mentally rehearsing your warm-up, going through all those steps in as much detail as you can possibly imagine, and working your way all the way through the event or the important parts of the event, right? This could be everything like seeing a perfect line through the corner. You're nervous about cornering. What's that perfect line look in the cornering? What's that perfect stroke look like in the pool that I'm going to do, or in the swim today? What does it look like, or how's it going to feel, in my mind when I crush that tough hill, right? So focus when you're doing this, focus on how that visualization as you're rehearsing this in mind is affecting your physical state. When you start thinking about that race and you start, thinking about that corner, did that make your heart rate go up? Did your hands get a little bit sweaty? So that's connecting, again, that mental and that physical state. And if that's happening, again, that for one tells you that you're getting the right details. So that's important. But it's also important at that point to focus on letting go of that tension and relaxing your muscles and continue to rehearse that point. So again, thinking about, I'm nervous going through a corner with a pack of riders. I'm nervous getting into that swim because people are going to be kicking and swimming over the top of me. You continue to rehearse that, continue to focus on relaxing, continue, letting go of that tension. And then when that event occurs, you're going to be that much more prepared for it. All right, another technique that I like to use is what I call the 1% more. And there's probably other names for this one here. But this is really about recognizing your current state and pushing it just that little bit more, okay? This could be, I'm going to go 10 steps more, 10 pedal strokes more. I'm going to make it to the next tree. I'm not going to quit till I get to the top of that hill. Or even telling yourself, I can do anything for 30 seconds or 60 seconds when you're doing a hard interval. And then repeating that process again and again as you need to, right? So it's really about getting through that tough moment when you need to. Again, this is not about pushing through dangerous pain, and that's a difference I'll keep referring to, right? So it's not like, bone sticking out, I need to go 1% more to make it. No, all right? So you need to recognize that. And make sure, as with the visualization and the other techniques, and I'll mention this again, that you play with this in training and practice. What does that feel like to go 1% more? Can I do that? And so I recognize that mental and physical state when it happens. Another technique, and this is probably one many people have heard about, which is called reframing. So reframing is basically replacing the I can't with the I can, right? It's a self-talk technique used for identifying negative or irrational thoughts, disrupting those thoughts, and finding positive alternatives, right? So instead of going in and saying, I'm going to lose the race today, going back and saying, I'm excited to be racing and will enjoy doing what I love. So reframing that. Or looking at a poor performance as an opportunity to see where you're at with your fitness and training, and use that as an opportunity to learn, right? So many years ago, I was doing my level 2 USA cycling coaching, and it was run by a coach and who told us, the first question he asked his athlete after a race or an event, it didn't matter how that went, was, what did you learn today? And I always thought that was pretty positive, or pretty powerful thing. It helped reframe a negative event. It also helped you kind of reflect, even if it was a positive event, because there's always something that you can learn. So that's another reframing technique, right? One of my other personal favorites are Ironman athletes who say they can't do a 20-minute FTP test. I'm like, you race your bike for 112 miles, right? And a 20-minute FTP test is nothing. Yeah, I know they're tough, right? But I try to remind them that they've done harder rides that are much longer than 20 minutes, and that, we don't always want to worry about a number. We get a number from an FTP test, but it's just a number, right? And just like visualizations and the 1% more technique, reframing needs to be recognized when it happens, and it needs to be practiced. So here's some other techniques. Power words, say it, be it, right? So some of my athletes are probably familiar with this. We talked about, like, in cyclocross races, smooth is fast, and to have that word in your mind, having a target word or power word when things are going tough out on a course, okay? It could be, swim through the keyhole, fast feet, be the ball, all these type of things that you remember when things are kind of going tough and you need to push through. Now, the magnet is one where you can, visualize the rider in front of you, the racer in front of you is a magnet, and you're just being drawn to them. The top of the hill, it's a magnet. You're just being drawn to them, right? To push you through that tough spot, right? Be the wolf, the lion, the tiger, the bear, what are animal that you like? So if there's an animal that inspires you or that embodies those characteristics that you like, I welcome you to go on YouTube and look at some of those videos of those animals on the hunt, on the prowl. Look at their focus, look at their concentration. That's something that you can reflect upon as well for your mental toughness training. All right, so let's talk a little bit. We've talked about techniques. Let's talk a little bit about goal setting your way to mental toughness, right? Because this is an essential part in developing your mental toughness strategy, right? So in many cases, the goal setting is really the foundation that you're going to anchor to, right? So again, a common theme here that I keep mentioning tonight, focus on what is in your control, right? That's the first goal that you need to do, and recognize that. I don't care if you need to write that down on a piece of paper, discuss it with your teammates or friends or whatever, but really focus on what's in your control. So here's the other thing. Goals don't need to be something like winning. That's great. That's a great goal to have. You know, we can all have that goal. I want to win a race or win an event. And it's okay to have some of this extrinsic motivation, but in the long run, it's better to focus on the intrinsic, the internal ones, all right, for setting your goals. It's also important to set some levels of goals or some layers of goals. Maybe these can be an A, B, and C. Like I didn't hit my A goal, but maybe I hit my B goal, or at the end I hit my C goal. And for some of those, the C goal can be that you towed up, you lined up for the race. For some people, that's a good goal to have. That they're nervous, they have the fear about racing or an event. That C goal is just showing up. You know, that's certainly a great one to have. They can also be short-term and long-term goals. And finally, you know, make your goal public. That can help you, right? This can be social media. Like I see this on Facebook all the time. Somebody signs up for an Ironman race or some other race and they share it, right? And that's a great way to set that goal and to give you some accountability. But you don't have to share it on social media, and I don't blame you if you don't, right? There's lots of stuff on social media, craziness nowadays. But you could just share it with your family, your friends, and of course, make sure you share that with your coach. That's important too. So that goal, really setting those goals and sharing that publicly, combines all that together with your support structure. And as I mentioned, and it gives you some accountability, which is important. Don't starve the bad wolf. So we talked a lot about feeding the good wolf, and we didn't really talk so much about this bad wolf character, except that he's bad or she's bad, right? But in the beginning, remember I said there has to be some balance, and there are positive aspects of negative thinking. And you're like, what? But there are. So what we want to do is we want to use negative thoughts in several different ways, including as a learning experience to help us be in the moment, to help us formulate a plan and recognize when we need to focus, okay? So let me differentiate a little bit more here. We're not talking about thoughts that are overly aggressive or hostile or thoughts that make us be a jerk, right? We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is negative thoughts that help us develop caution and help us develop critical thinking, right? So here's another story. And I hope this helps elaborate this a little bit more. And I don't recall the author and all the exact points, but I'll share it with you. It's a pretty simple one. So when you're about to drill a hole in a wall, the chances are that you're going to pay close attention to the measurements involved where you want to drill, as well as where you're placing your hand at that moment. Okay, so where you want to drill and where's my hand. So the anxiety and negative thoughts associated with the downside, which is maybe I'm going to accidentally drill into a water pipe or drill into my hand, encourages you to drill exactly in the right spot. So those negative thoughts, not a bad thing there. We'll take this a little bit further. So here was a study done by the University of Pittsburgh called the States of the Mind Model, okay? So what they found here, that there was actually an ideal balance or a ratio for positive versus negative states of mind. And they referred to this as the golden section of 2/3 positive to 1/3 negative. The study also concluded that while positive thoughts can be immediately reinforcing, and we know that, right? I talked about that. we need to recognize and balance those negative thoughts at times to protect ourselves. Again, not drilling into our hand. So as I said before, it's not just about feeding that good wolf, but when and how to feed both wolves. So how do we build all this into practice? We talked about these techniques. So where do we start, and how do we do this every day so they become part of our athlete self? All right. So here's a couple of simple ones, and I'll just go through and read this list a little bit, and then we'll get into it a little bit more. So one of the easiest things to do is take 5 or 10 minutes before a workout, right? This could be tied in with some breathing practice. I've had athletes do this before they go into the pool, before they do some interval work, taking 5 minutes to go through, do that visualization, visualize what's my stroke going to look like today? How am I going to handle those intervals using all those techniques, okay? You can do it while you work out. So the magnet technique's a great one for that. You could be on Zwift if you know what Zwift is, and I think most of us now do, and you see that racer ahead of you, I want to catch him. You could visualize that instead of the magnet. It could be, if we want to stick with kind of the wolf theme, or the bear or lion, we're hunting that rabbit. You could do it simply, you're brushing your teeth in the morning, or night before you go to bed. Like what thoughts can I reframe, and that ties in with the gratitude practice. So this is a good way to build that mental toughness, the mental ability by doing that. And you can do that every day, right? And so like any skill, this also needs to happen well before we enter a race or an event. So we need to start practicing that. Again, just as I go back and I talked about riding a bike, swim stroke, these type of things. You didn't just show up at an Ironman with no swim, bike, or run practice. You practice that. And it's the same thing with doing the mental skills, right? So, and why? Because practice equals preparedness, and preparedness reduces stress, okay? And as we know, that too much stress does have a negative influence on physical performance, right? Just think of the person who's stressed out and they missed that field goal kick, or they missed that putt because they were not mentally prepared, or they were dealing with the stress, right? And skills, like fitness, is not created overnight. So enjoy the process. All right. So when is mental toughness not mental? And in many cases, it may not be. So mental toughness needs to be differentiated from times when it's not just a matter of pushing through, right? This means a distinction or recognizing that if it's just a tough moment or it's an injury, right? If a bone's sticking out of our leg, we understand it's an injury. But, could it be hydration or fueling or something else that's affecting us? That's not mental, that's our body actually telling us something. And our body's pretty good at telling us things too. So we need to listen to that. So again, mental toughness is not about putting yourself in a dangerous or life-threatening situation, okay? And use the techniques that I've given you to recognize what that bad wolf is saying, to critically self-assess what's going on in that moment. So no medal or trophy is worth your life or long-term injury, okay? Remember, skills practice is an important aspect of being able to recognize, access, and assess that connection between the mental or physical state. So practice it, and then you should be able to differentiate that if the body isn't already telling you that. But here's the thing. Sometimes things happen, and well, coach, I still got injured. Something still happens. We can't prevent. Mental toughness can't always prevent every injury. Neither can physical training, right? So injuries still happen, and when they do happen, mental toughness still can come into play, and mental toughness training can still come into play. So we need to learn how to apply it in these situations. And you can still use all those techniques that I gave you to help you with this, right? This could be visualizing what you need to do to heal and recover, and reframing those negative thoughts. So think about, what is your job now, right? How well am I doing that job? Your job at that point with that injury could be resting, recovering, healing, right? That becomes your performance that you want to do well, instead of the race or the event, using that mental toughness for that performance. All right. So again, it's a total shift to what you may have been doing before, right? And you can also, start considering alternatives to your favorite sport. Now, if you're a triathlete, you got things to, other things to kind of pull from. But if you're a cyclist or just a runner, maybe you can swim, right? Maybe there's something else that you can do. And this can also be tied to dealing with what to be grateful for, okay? Remember, as I said before, control what you can control. If you're injured, again, that's out of your control, but you can control your mental state during that time. Support systems. All right, so support systems are really important, and this is another topic that we could spend hours on and go down all sorts of different rabbit holes on. But in short, to really excel with mental toughness, it should not and cannot be done without a support system, okay? So there's many stories out there that we've heard, from Olympic and professional athletes who mentioned how they could not achieve their success without the help of their parents. Maybe their kids inspired them. It could be their teammates. It could be their coach, and having those folks in the corner. That is really important for you to build your mental toughness strategy around, right? So if you're working a regular 9-to-5 job, and probably most of you on this webinar are, and that you're a weekend warrior, I think this becomes a huge part in supporting both the physical and mental demands of reaching your goal. I mean, if you're an Ironman athlete, you know that to be true. You have to have that support structure there every step of the way in the corner on both the physical training and the mental training. So make sure that you practice that. Make sure you build that into your toughness training. And don't forget to practice some gratitude with those folks who are your support system. Now, I wanted to share a few references with you folks here. Some of these are good books. There's lots of different books, lots of different references. These are some of my favorites that I've read: The Champion Mind, The Mindful Athlete, Mental Training for Peak Performance, Grit, and the new Toughness Training for Sports. These can all be found on Amazon. I recommend, pick up a couple, but find some other ones out there if you're interested in learning a little bit more about mental toughness. They are great resources. There's also some apps and tools that are out there, and there are a bazillion apps that are out there. These are a couple that I'm familiar with that I have tried. Calm is a good one, Headspace, and the Mindfulness app. So again, these are sometimes more meditative types of apps, but again, to help clear your mind, get your focus going, build that in, and it's a great way to kind of make it convenient for yourself. So here's some homework for everybody here before we start kind of wrapping up and getting the questions. I want you to think about these 4 points here, and what you think about what words you would use to characterize your athlete self. Are you somebody who needs mental toughness? Are you somebody who go back to, I'm showing up on a race and I'm the one saying I'm going to get dropped, or am I the one saying I'm here to kick everyone's ass today? Next, I want you to write down ways you have specifically fed the bad wolf, okay? And again, it could be, like I just said, that negative self-talk. Write down ways that you have specifically fed that good wolf, okay? And extra bonus points if you've talked about ways that you've reframed in between the two, right? So, and then finally, what are techniques you can or you have used to nurture that good wolf, right? So a little bit of homework assignment for everybody to do. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to any questions. That's the end of the slide presentation. I hope that everybody found it interesting. And again, you're welcome to type questions into the chat box on the right, or also down at the bottom, there's a section for you to put questions in. So I'll give everybody a couple of moments here if you want to add anything or ask any questions. Otherwise, I'll just knocked it out of the park, right? I did such a good job. I answered all your mental toughness training questions. All right. So I'm not seeing anything coming in. And you can also reach out to me at the end if you need to, or afterwards. So, but here's my contact information. So reach at Noel@BonkWorks. That's BonkWerx.com. Yes, Bonk is really my last name. Sometimes people are I kind of get a chuckle out of that, I guess, in endurance sports. But also, if you're out there, and I know many of you on here, I recognize a lot of names on here. If you like what we're doing here, if you like the webinars, give us a follow or a like on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook. Plus, I post a lot of this stuff on there, and when these events are coming up, like I said, I don't blame people not being on social media. So I can also add you on my mailing list. If you're not on the mailing list, you can shoot me an email, and I'll add you on there. And you can also contact us to learn more. So, and then finally, I'll wrap up. Oh, let's see. We got a question here. Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. I think many times, we are attracted to that, or we find it easy to work on the physical side, and we neglect the mental side. And I think part of that is that people don't know how to start or where to start with the mental side. So that's an excellent point. So, but again, I'll give another minute here for a few more questions. And I also want to mention we do have a few openings for coaching clients, and we also do, like Matt Stair has some openings for nutritional consults if people are interested in learning a little bit about sports nutrition. And we did the last webinar on the low carbohydrate training, so he's a good resource for that. As far as the coaching, offer several different tiers of the coaching, something that fit for everybody. We also have some really good testing that's going on right now with the metabolic testing. If you really want to understand what your aerobic engine and your anaerobic engine looks like, that's a great test to do that. All right, so great question. Tips of those struggling to sleep at night before a race due to a race mind. So that's an excellent question, something that happens to all of us. So this comes down to practicing as well as a skill set, and being prepared and understand, preparedness can reduce that stress. So you have to go back and reframe that stress, first of all. Like, okay, am I nervous? Why am I nervous? What am I recognizing? Am I nervous because I didn't train? Okay, you understand that. But these are things that have to be practiced ahead of time, especially if this is a common occurrence for you that you can't sleep before race. The other thing I recommend is making sure things like that are distractions, things that kind of make our brain go haywire and be up late, and this is screen times, TV, phones, having that stuff off several hours ahead of time. Those apps that I mentioned are also good, like that Calm app is a good, even though I said be off the screen, but that's something you could listen to maybe a few hours ahead of time to kind of calm you down. There's some other devices that are out there, white noise devices and stuff like that'll help you. But I think going through, the first step is recognizing what's causing that, and then going back and seeing, okay, how do I reframe that? Is it again, am I feeling unprepared? What can I control? So if the stuff's out of your control, control what you can control. And I think understanding that and reminding yourself of that will help to reduce some of that stress. So I hope that kind of answered that question. All right. We have about another 30 seconds here. And if we don't have any other questions, we will call it a night. I thank everybody for joining me tonight. I hope everybody learned something. Don't forget to do your homework. Answer those questions. That's just an exercise for yourself. I mean, if you want to share it with me, that's fine, but that's just a good exercise for you to do. All right. And with that, I am going to end the broadcast. Everybody have a great night. Don't forget to feed both of those wolves. 2/3 good, 1/3 bad. All right. Have a good night and happy holidays.